Hard to believe it's already been 3 months since the Kansas City Chiefs won their third Super Bowl in 5 seasons, including back-to-back seasons in 23 and 24. And while we eagerly await the fun schedule release videos surely set to come out in the next week or so, we do know we'll be seeing the reigning champions kick off the season. Now, I know folks are getting antsy, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. The league shared on social media last week that the full schedule released is, quote, coming soon. And today, Colts owner and CEO Jim Irsay giving fans a little bit more of a tease, saying, quote, I smell a 2024 schedule coming out soon. So while we don't have a full season to dissect just yet, there are some big moments we can talk about and when that will happen throughout the season. So for that, we welcome in CBS Sports writer John Breech to discuss. Breech, we appreciate you being here. Let's start with the champs, who we know will open the season on Thursday Night Football in Kansas City. Now, last year we saw the Chiefs without Chris Jones and Travis Kelce in a game where they lost to Detroit. Who are some possible opponents that we could see in that opening game, and are we expecting some similar fireworks and headline grabbers in the opener?
Haley, let me just say real quick, I am glad to see that tweet from Jim Irsay, because I was starting to think the NFL wasn't going to release the schedule and they're going to make us guess all the games, but clearly it will be out at some point. But speaking of guessing these games, that's kind of what we're doing. We know the Chiefs will be hosting that Thursday night opener. We saw what the NFL did last season when they put the Lions there. That was a huge surprise to have Detroit in the Week 1 opener. A lot of people thought maybe it would be an AFC title rematch between the Bengals and Chiefs. They didn't do that. They gave the spotlight to an up-and-coming team. And I think the NFL might embrace that philosophy going forward. And if they do that for the 2024 season, I think the best candidate might be the Houston Texans. They didn't get a lot of primetime love in 2023, but we saw them. They were the surprise team. So how do you fix that lack of primetime love? You put them in the opener against the Chiefs. Of course, the Chiefs, you can put their whole schedule in primetime because they also face the Bengals at home, the Ravens at home, Derek Carr, the Saints, going back to Kansas City. That's a home game. But my guess here would probably be the Texans. I think just the way the NFL has been scheduling games, that one would make the most sense.
I would love to see C.J. Stroud versus Patrick Mahomes. Certainly two of the better quarterbacks that we've seen develop really early on in their careers. Let's move over to the NFC, where we'll get our first ever game in Brazil as the NFL continues to expand its global reach. Sao Paulo will now play host to the Eagles and the Packers in Week 1. It's also a Friday game, John, which is also not very common in the NFL. Now, I went to the Germany game between the Dolphins and the Chiefs last year, and just seeing how those fans were able to rally around those teams, I know that the fan base will be excited to see the Eagles and the Packers. But what's the other excitement sort of surrounding this matchup in a new city?
Yeah, this is absolutely a unique matchup. You look at the fact that there are 272 games on the schedule. This is the only one we know for sure where we know both teams, the location, how it's going to be televised. It's not going to be televised. It's going to be streamed exclusively on Peacock. And so I think this is an interesting game because it is the NFL's first ever game in Brazil. And whereas you had a built-in NFL fan base in Europe. When you started those London games, when you start the Germany games, you had NFL Europe there. You knew that fans there were interested in football. They love football. The tickets sell out in minutes when they go on sale for those European games. There's a little more of an unknown in Brazil, where you didn't have these prior American football leagues. So it will be interesting to see how the fans embrace this. This game is being played at Corinthians Arena. They have a soccer team there that is not allowed to wear a green in their home games. So it is interesting that you have two green teams playing in Corinthians Arena, but it will be fascinating to see how the Brazilian fans embrace, but they're getting a big game with Eagles-Packers.
You know, I shared a video of Chop Robinson, a conversation that we shared at the Combine earlier this year, and one of the places he said if he could disappear and go anywhere, he said it would be Brazil. And all of the Brazilian NFL fans were quote tweeting it, hopping in, come on, Chop, come down to Brazil. So I think that the atmosphere of that one is really going to be exciting for those Brazilian fans. Of course, we know we have other international games this season. That includes a return to both London and Munich, 4 total games kicking off in Europe. And for as long as I can remember, John, the Jaguars in London seem to be synonymous at this point. It feels like they're always playing across the pond every year. But you also have the Bears and the Vikings, who will serve as the home team in England. The Panthers will call Munich home in their matchup. When you look at these 4 teams and playing in Europe, what stands out to you about their potential matchups?
Yeah, as you mentioned, Jacksonville is sent out to London all the time. At this point, if you're a Jags fan, do whatever you can. Just get a timeshare in London. You have the space already out there. You just file October away in your calendar because that's generally when Jacksonville is playing out there. There has been a report that the Jags will be sent to London for back-to-back games for the second straight season. We saw them do that last year. They were the first team in NFL history to play consecutive London games, to even play 2 games in London in the same season. And it went really well for them because they beat the Falcons, they beat the Bills. They went 2-0 on that trip. So if they do that again, they would play a game at Wembley Stadium and then either play the Vikings or Bears at Tottenham Stadium. And it would likely be the Bears because they have a home game scheduled against the Vikings. And so it's also interesting to see the Vikings and Bears. You have 2 NFC North teams going out there that both have pretty good fan bases out in England. And then, of course, the NFL is returning to Munich. They played in Frankfurt last season, but we know that Munich, Germany loves football. As you said, you were out there in Germany. It gets absolutely crazy. The tickets sell out in about 3 minutes. And so it'll be interesting to see who the Panthers play. They could play the Cowboys, the Bengals, the Cardinals. The NFL has some very solid options for that Germany game. We saw them put Dolphins Chiefs out there, so we know they love to put a headliner in Germany.
Yeah, the fan I sat next to at the game told me that they go to bed at like 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then wake up again at 2 and 3 so that they can watch the NFL action happen live. And I just think that's such a crazy, unique thing that the NFL is really taking advantage of over in Europe. Now, you mentioned my Cowboys, and I'm so glad that you did. I love talking about them. Thanksgiving has long been dominated by them on TV. In terms of the holiday games, though, this year, Breech, we'll also be seeing history made. For just the 3rd time in 75 years, we have a doubleheader on a Wednesday, which is the date for Christmas this year. Has the NFL just overtaken the NBA and some of those other sports as the sport to watch on Christmas now?
Yeah, this really feels like the year where the NFL decided, all right, you know what, we're just going to take over Christmas because that's the only way to explain why you're playing a Wednesday game. A league executive had said in December, you know what, we're not going to play on Christmas this year. We don't want to be playing football games on a Wednesday. The NFL saw the TV ratings for Christmas in 2023, said, all right, you know what, we're going to play, not only are we going to play, but we're going to play a doubleheader. But it's interesting because this could actually be the reason why we've seen the schedule release kind of get delayed, because the NFL kind of did an about face here. They decided they are going to play on Christmas. They decided they're going to bid the games out. So that's a process that adds time. Then you have to figure out who's going to play on a Wednesday. The 4 teams that play that day will be playing on the prior Saturday. So that's a new wrinkle in the schedule that has to be ironed out before you can release this entire thing. So this will be the first time since 1936 that we have seen 2 NFL games on a Wednesday. So certainly history making, and it will be a busy Christmas for us football fans and employees and people covering the sport.
Yeah, just one more thing I was going to say for us here on HQ to keep our eye on Christmas Day. But it's fun. It's exciting to see the different sports and what everyone's watching around their Christmas dinner or lunch table. Breech, one of the big topics of the offseason is always the rule changes and how the game will look different in the upcoming season. We know this year the biggest change is the kickoff rule and how that's going to look different. But the NFL owners also approved a new rule last year that will allow teams to play 2 short week games. So obviously the first thing that comes to mind here is player safety. But how do you think this rule change will affect the upcoming season?
Yeah, I think you do this because it gives, you know, the NFL wanted to give Amazon kind of a bigger schedule on Thursday. And to do that, you need the bigger teams, the more popular teams playing on Thursday. And so now you can give those teams 1 or 2 games. We saw it last season with the Thursday night schedule being a little stronger than it had in the past. And this also opens the door for this Christmas game because this is also a short week game. And so if you have a team play Thursday earlier in the season, say in 2022, they would have been ineligible to play in the Christmas game since you could only have 1 short week game. But now that you can have multiple short week games, it gives the NFL a lot more options, not just for Thursday, but for the Christmas game. So I think the league is just kind of putting themselves in a situation where they can pluck teams and put them wherever they want on the schedule. And I don't see this rule going away anytime soon. I think we'll see multiple teams playing short week games, multiple short week games going forward.
Yeah, a lot of the players have spoken out about that. Joe Burrow saying if they're going to add an extra week of games in the future, they also need an extra bye week. So good news on the football front there. We do get a little bit more action, but certainly something to consider. So in terms of the 2024 season, Breech, we don't know the exact schedule, obviously, in terms of matchups, but we do know some of the opponents that could be facing off. When I look at this list of notable games this season, obviously the Cowboys fan in me always has that Cowboys 49ers game circled. I think Dallas gets Detroit again later this year as well. So that's another game that, if you remember last year, was so much fun, came down to the wire. But when you look at some of these notable games, or even just others that aren't on the list, what stands out to you as matchups we should be counting down to?
Yeah, I mean, the entire 49ers schedule could go in prime time. We see the 49ers Bills, 49ers Cowboys, but let's not forget there's also a Super Bowl rematch with 49ers Chiefs. We get a Jim Harbaugh Bowl. We saw that back in the Super Bowl over a decade ago when Jim Harbaugh's 49ers played John's Ravens. Well, now we get Chargers Ravens this year, so that should be exciting. I would circle Falcons Vikings on my calendar. That's not something I probably would have circled 3 months ago, but now that Kirk Cousins left Minnesota, the Vikings, I don't know what the Falcons are doing. They're drafting quarterbacks when they signed Kirk Cousins to this huge contract. So I like Falcons Vikings a lot. Broncos Saints, we'll see Sean Payton return to New Orleans. I think that could be a fascinating game. And let's not forget, we have two rookie quarterbacks who went in the top 2 spots with Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels. Their 2 teams, the Bears and Commanders, will be playing this year. So I think that will be a fascinating game. You have Saquon Barkley going back to New York as a member of the Eagles. Giants fans are going to boo him out of the stadium. And then, you know what? Let's not forget Derek Carr facing the Raiders, the team he spent his whole career with before joining New Orleans. So I think there are a lot of juicy games. We just need to know what time and what day. So tell us when they're going to happen, NFL.
I know those team media departments are just itching to release those fun schedule release videos that always come out. It keeps our attention. Just one more thing to look forward to as we count down to the season. John Breech, we appreciate your time breaking down some of these notable dates on the schedule before we get the actual schedule. We appreciate your time. Hey, you can get more of John Breech on the Pick 6 podcast. He's joined by Will Brinson and Tyler Sullivan in the latest episode to discuss that Tom Brady roast that aired on Netflix a couple days ago. They also look to answer each team in the AFC's biggest post-draft questions. So still plenty to discuss with the 2024 season around the corner. Scan that QR code on your screen or listen in wherever you get your podcasts.